Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. That there is a dead flower. This is a low key background. This is a high key background. Let's go to the darkroom. I'll show you the prints I've made of the dead flower, and then I'll show you the setup that I used to make it. So this is the first frame on the roll that I made a print of, and that was that first frame that I did all my metering for, and everything else was kind of just playing around after that. If I was shooting large format, I would have had one sheet and this is all it would have been. But I'll show you how I did the test for this and how I got to this print. Very easy. So this is the test that I made. I've got a piece of test paper under the enlarger. And there it is there, if I can stay still. I started off with contrast 0 because I want to try and build up the highlights and then worry about my blacks afterwards. I knew that if I can get my highlights right, then I can use another filter to be able to make the blacks pop out. So with the contrast 0 filter, that's one test strip, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 seconds. I thought 2 was too light and 4 was kind of a little bit too dark in the highlights, so I decided to go for 3 seconds in between. So I put another test strip down like so, and I hit that with the contrast 0 filter for 3 seconds like my first test print showed, but then this time I used a contrast 5 filter just to build up the darks and the blacks and the contrast in the print, and I used that for 3 seconds as well. It was just a hunch, and that's what I came out with, and I thought, wow, that looks really good. I don't need to do any more messing about with this print. Contrast 0 for 3 seconds, contrast 5, split grey printing. And then before I wasted any more paper, I just used another test print over the flower itself at the same times as this print here, just to make sure that that flower wasn't going to go too dark. And I was quite happy with what I come back with. So that's when I went off and made the print. And this is a print of the very last frame that I took, frame number 15. You can see that's still on the white background. I had the light still on at the bottom, so it's kind of gradient in from a light white to a kind of grey. So I wouldn't say it's high key, but it's just the way it was. And you can see I've got bags of detail in the leaf and the stem and on the flower. This one was a little bit different to try and make under the enlarger. I'll show you why. So I placed my test strip again over the leaf and over the stem, and you can see I'm using the contrast 0 filter just to try and build the highlights again. And I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I realised at 6 seconds that was going to cut the mustard for me with the highlights. It's just about build the highlights where I want it to be. So then I had to do another test to see where I need to place the contrast 5 filter. And there it is there, that's the actual test that I was using for contrast 5. So I hit contrast 0 for 6 seconds of the whole piece of paper, and then I just did another test with a contrast 5 increments of 2 seconds again, just so I can see whereabouts the blacks and the shadows are going to start building up. So I thought 8 seconds looked the best for the blacks and also the details, and the highlights complement it really well. So I ended up going for contrast 0 6 seconds and contrast 5 for 8 seconds, but I still wasn't sure about the flower. So I did one single test strip on the flower, contrast 0 6, contrast 5 for 8 seconds, and then realised it was a bit too dark. So all I did was just use my dodge tool, stop light hitting the flower for about 3 seconds when it was on contrast 5, and it all came out really nice. So I've just come out of the darkroom, and as you can see, the prints have come out really nice. I only literally took 2 negatives, one white background and one black background, but I was really aiming for the black background. It's only the fact that I had 15 shots on that KODAK TMAX that I ended up shooting quite a few more under and overexposing. It's an expired film from 2006, so you never really know what you're going to get, but I'm really pleased to say that the first photograph that I took and that I'd metered for, that was the one that I printed. So I did all my calculations right and made it good in the darkroom. That was a low-key light. As you can see, this is the setup I use, and I did this last night. You know, I have to have all the lights off just so that then I can focus the flower using the lighting setup, so there's no other lighting going on that's influencing my photography. So this was the black background that I used, and I'll show you the setup. It's just oh, anyone can do this. This is just an easel for photo frames, and this is a piece of mat board that comes, you know, what you put inside your frames when you're framing prints. So that's a black piece of mat board, and I've got this white card over here. But this again is just a bit of black foam board with some white paper over it, and I'm using a tripod which has got gaffer tape on the back just to hold it in place if I need to bounce any light back into the flower. The lights here, I'm using these GVM video LED panels. I've featured these before on my channel, you know, but they're just LED panels with barn doors. So this was like the key light that I was using here. And again, these LED lights are only very simple. I didn't want to use flash. I just find I don't really like flash photography, this kind of work. I like to kind of use static lighting and model the lights where I want the lighting to be, where I want it to fall. So yeah, I was using these GVM LED panels, and although they take batteries, I had them powered into the mains because sometimes if the batteries do start dying during your shoot, the intensity of the light starts dropping. So it's always good to use the mains and keep these powered onto the mains. So I used two of these. I've got one here, which was the key light for the flower, and I've got one here as well, which is lighting the background. And I didn't have to light the background for a low-key shot, but I just wanted to give the print a little bit of depth just by shining a little bit of light at the bottom and letting it gradient to the top. That way, the print just doesn't look like it's floating in space. It's got some depth to it. But it was just a little bit too powerful. When I was setting up last night doing this photography, the light was just, even though it was on the lowest brightness, it was just still a little bit too bright. So I ended up using this Light reflector or this diffuser and just gaffer tape that over the top. And again, with this light here, I've got no diffusion on it. I've got no fancy diffuse boxes for it. So I just put some A4 paper, taped it to the barn doors, and that diffused the light nicely. It didn't make it so harsh. And that was creating this nice little soft light just around the flower here. And then the metering side of things, I tried some incident readings, pointing it back towards the camera. Obviously, I didn't want to point it towards the light, the incident reading, because that would just blast the lumisphere and the flower would go dark. That was natural. So I decided to swerve the incident reading and do some spot metering. And I ended up spot metering on the darkest part of the flower here. And then once I got my reading for that would come out middle grey. And then all I did was just drop down 2 stops and pretty much went from there. And then I did a reading on the background. That was most important. I didn't want that to be over bright. So when I spot metered on the flower, it gave me 2 seconds at 5.6.5. Well, obviously that's going to be middle grey. I don't want that to be middle grey. It was the shadow part of the flower. So I just decided to close down 2 stops, and that gave me 2 seconds at f11.5, but I put into the camera f11 at 2 seconds. Then I had to allow for the age of the film. Now I shot the same film from the same batch a couple of weeks ago that Gary Geezer sent me, and I found that film does need a 1-stop extra exposure for the age. That was the best test that I did. So knowing that, I dialed in another stop extra for the age of the film, so that's now 3 seconds. And then I had to allow for the bellows extension on the camera, which was another stop. So now I'm at 4 seconds at f11. But I've now got to think about reciprocity failure, and I went on the Kodak's website, and for that film it said between 1 and 10 seconds allow 1/3 of a stop. So that pretty much brings me back down to f11 because of that extra 5.6.5 that I measured in the first place. So I was pretty confident with the metering that I did, and also the lighting setup. I got my DSLR and I did a quick test shot, like a Polaroid if you like, just to make sure the light was falling where I wanted it to fall, and it was. And I started taking the shots on the Mamiya, and the first shot I did, like I said, at the meter time, 4 seconds f11. And then I had another 14 shots to play with, so I just went to f8, f16. Then I started changing the background, changing the lighting, changing the bounce and stuff like that. And then I took the black background away, put a white background in. I thought I'd try and do a little bit of high key stuff as well. And so I burst the whole frame off, but I'm really pleased because the very first frame that I metered for was the one that I printed. My wife says to me, she loves the prints. She said that it reminds her of the time that I bought her flowers. Oh well. there's the prints anyway. So that was the I wouldn't say high key one, but that was the white background print there that I made. You notice the composition's different. I slightly went in a bit more with that one. And that one there is the one that I came here for in the first place, was the low key shot. And you notice also the way I framed it, diagonally trying to come up from the bottom right up to the top left of the print. So yeah, I'm happy with what I've done in the darkroom, and you know, it's just a simple setup. It's something that I had a bee in my bonnet, and I thought I'm going to take some photographs and set up a simple scene in this little room here. And you know, just goes to show you don't have to have all the fancy equipment to try and do lighting and try and get something going. The only thing I like to have done was possibly add a bigger black background on the wall in the background, but that black card was the only one that I had, so I had to get kind of close with the camera, a little bit close with the light, but you know, a little bit of patience, a little bit of time, I managed to work my way around it. And also that KODAK TMAX film, that stuff's solid as a rock, isn't it? 2006. You know, you could expect a little bit of sensitivity loss over the years, but only one stop, and that stuff performed really well. I thought very sharp bags of tone, and XTOL seemed to complement it really well. So that's one that I'm going to have to write down for the future. And I've really got to say thanks a lot to everyone that supported me on the last video where I was trying to expose for the shadows and develop for the highlights. Completely new territory for me, and I've got amazing valued support in the comment section, and also private emails and messages as well. So thanks everybody that contributed towards that. I really appreciate it. Something I'm going to look to get on with more in the future. But for now, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I enjoyed this shoot. I enjoyed the darkroom session. I hope you did as well. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.